Wes and Ted's Excellent Conversation, a podcast about teaching, learning, and anything else that pops into Wes and Ted's heads.
Hi, Wes.
Well, hello, Ted. How are you? It's good to see you.
Nice to see you as well. It's
Outstanding.
Good to see you.
Outstanding.
You were about to share something with our audience.
I was, yes. We were before the recording. I was mentioning, what was it? I already forgot. No, I didn't forget. If you're listening on a podcast app, which is lovely, just a reminder that you can check us out on YouTube if you'd like to be watching this. And if you wouldn't, then podcasts work too. We've got the cross-platform thing happening. There was something else I was going to mention. Oh, yeah. Wanted to name check my good friend Pete Baum, who might be listening, because he pointed out that in the past, at some points, we've recorded and then released, months later. And so when we refer to current events and all that kind of good stuff, that can be a little jarring. And I'm delighted to say that at the time that you, dear listener, are hearing this, assuming you listen on the published date, we will have recorded it 2 weeks in your past. And in future, we're going to adopt a schedule of publishing on the fourth Wednesday of every month. We'll probably be recording the Wednesday before, so that what's the word? That cognitive dissonance will be greatly reduced. So I think that'll be a good thing.
And to update any of the kind of timely stories that we've shared so far in the podcast, Rush Limbaugh still dead.
Dude,
Kamala Harris still vice president. What else did we talk about?
I don't know. We had all kinds of sort of current events dating back to months and months. Oh, I should also name check my friend Dan Thrawn, who was the one who said, "Oh, you got to publish on a." Honestly, he's a big fancy LA guy and he knows all this stuff. So
I'll throw in Josh House, who's my friend who likes the podcast.
Oh,
so
yay! Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's good.
We've covered everybody.
And speaking of those fine folks and anyone else who may be listening, feel free to drop us a line. We are WATEC at wescarroll.com, WATEC at wescarroll.com, 2 R's, 2 L's. And we are always delighted to hear from you, your questions, your requests, your heckles, whatever it is that you would like to send to us.
We are also always delighted to introduce each other. I'm going to introduce Wes.
Outstanding, thank
you. He did spell his name successfully. He's Wes Carroll.
Won't let it go to my head. Mm-hmm.
I can't help it. I just got to do it. 2 R's, 2 L's.
At
wescarroll.com. And Wes is an extremely personable guy. And I think that's... What? What's your objection to that? He's a very personable guy and someone who's very easy to talk to. And these conversations are, I would say delightful for me. So
really?
That's a good sign.
I feel the same way. Thank you very much.
And that's absolutely separate from his intelligence. These are separate intelligences, even though Wes doesn't believe in multiple intelligences.
I don't believe in No, it's not that I don't believe in...
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Explain.
Well, all right. We'll get into that in a minute. But first of all, my podcast partner here is the inimitable Ted Dorsey, Ted at tutorted.com, who's been doing SAT and ACT prep for a very long time. And that's really underselling it, because it's not that he's been doing it for a long time. He's really freaking good at it, is what it is. And I think that comes from the kind of deliberate learning that I think has been a part of your je ne sais pourquoi for quite some time. Actually, I do know why. I just don't know how. And multiple intelligences. No. It's not that I don't believe in multiple intelligences. I certainly think that people have different strengths and weaknesses, and that it's reasonable to subdivide different categories of intelligences in different ways. But I would not say that, let's see, where would I draw the line? There are many... I think I would only object to the idea of, you have as though we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, you have a 15 in creative thinking and a 13 in, and we rate these various scores and it's fixed for life, right? It's not so much the multiple thing. It's the sort of fixed mindset that it tends to lead into in so many cases.
Okay. That's great. That's an interesting clarification. And that I can totally be with you on that. That makes perfect sense to me. And the fixed mindset is so problematic and so dangerous. I'll tell a little story there. I do think that, we live in a time when we try to measure everything and we try to, quantify. And I think some of that actually, I was going to say is useful, but I think that a better way of saying it is like it serves a purpose. You know what I mean? Like useful kind of feels like it has like a grander thing. It's like, no, this is just, it gets us somewhere. It helps us understand a little bit. It doesn't explain the world. It's not like it does not equal reality, but it can be useful. It does something for us.
Yeah.
So, and I just said useful again, which is funny. I said it's not useful, but it is. Anyway, this is how these conversations go sometimes. I had this student whose mother emailed me. This is such an interesting and weird one.
Is this recent, by the way, or is this kind of from the archives?
This is like last couple weeks.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Student came in with a 20 on the ACT math.
Okay. Kind of a middle of the road score, would you say?
It's middle of the road, and it's actually below college eligible.
Yeah.
The college eligible standard is like 22.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously people go to college on that score anyway, but you want to get it above that.
And just for those who aren't familiar, our ACT is on a scale of 1 to 36.
It's 1 to 36. When they first devised it, they meant for 18 to be the mean, and then every 6 points to be a standard deviation.
Yeah.
And as these things go, the numbers
Sure.
change, and the mean is more like 21 point something now.
Okay. But the average score on the ACT is not quite enough to be college ready, is part of what you're telling us.
It depends on which college you're going to. Obviously.
Okay, fair enough. All right. I'll stop derailing your story. Go ahead.
No. So anyway, she started with a 20 on the math.
Yep.
She took the April ACT. It was her first real test ever.
Okay.
April 2021.
Yep.
And she got a 25 on the math. Okay. So from a 20 to a 25.
That's great.
One standard deviation is 6 points.
Mm-hmm.
The margin for error is like between 2 and 3 points. So basically, if you scored 2.5 points better or 2 points better on one test than another one, you can't be sure that actually represents true improvement. If you score 5 points better, then actually that is statistically significant.
Yeah. Something has happened. Yeah.
Exactly. So the mother in an email to me said she was the kid improved. What was it? I think 6 or 7 points on the whole. It was a good the entire test score improved by quite a bit.
And it's worth pointing out, a standard deviation is no freaking joke. That's a different category of performance. That's why, that's a big part of why standard deviations exist, to sort of bucketize, right? To sort of sort things into buckets that are significant, right?
And each standard deviation should be, and pretty much is, the same sort of leap, the same level of improvement. And one other kind of reference point for standard deviations is 100 points on the SAT is meant to be a standard deviation. So if you go up by 100 points, that's a number that people like, and that is, you can tell that's a good improvement. That's what we're talking about. So in this case, she was improving by, 83 and a third points, in terms of SAT, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So the mother sends me an email, and we're talking about the improvement, and I actually preemptively sent her sort of a celebratory email, basically saying, "Hey, cool, you went up this much, isn't that great?"
It's great.
And the mother's like, yes, we're happy with the result. The math score is the math score. Aptitude is aptitude. And that sentence, oh God, I hate that sentence so very much. And it comes back to what you were saying about fixed abilities. It's like, no. For one thing, this test doesn't measure aptitude.
That's true.
A long time ago, the SAT was the Scholastic Aptitude Test,
and they changed the name because they didn't want. Yeah, sorry.
And the intention was to measure a skill that went beyond your academic performance and measured your actual talent level, right? And then they dropped it, and it became just the SAT.
Yeah.
The ACT is measuring. I call it your math vocabulary. Basically, what's your kind of vocabulary knowledge level of math from 4th grade through 11th grade. If you're taking pre-calculus. So the kid has improved this much, and the mom basically it starts by ignoring the improvement and then attributes the improvement to the perceived lack of improvement to aptitude. And I couldn't resist, and I was just like, hey, I'd like to have a conversation about that. This is actually, let's talk. Because the problem for me in that situation, by the way, this is related to tutoring, not related to our topic at hand necessarily, but just an interesting story.
We'll see. Remains to be seen. I'm kind of linking it up in my mind. Go on.
Awesome. That's God. I can always count on you for that. Making my irrelevant nonsense relevant.
Far from it.
The problem for me is that the parents' beliefs can become the students' beliefs.
Of course.
And often do.
Parent beliefs becoming student beliefs. I mean, that's why I pay my therapist. Like, that's what it is.
Okay. And why your kids will pay their therapists.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's just how it works. You know what I mean? So,
okay. Let's get into it. So first of all, I'm reminded a few years ago, there's, a pair of parents of a really favorite student of mine, and the parents are both fantastic folks. I don't want to name check them because I don't want to embarrass them or anything of that sort. But really great people. And when I was first writing How to Be a Brighter Student, the mom who had a solid writing background did me the service of sort of a pre-edit kind of, quick pass to sort of point out some of the hot spots and all that kind of good stuff, which was great. And, one of the things that we got into a little bit, which was super interesting, is, my whole book is premised around the idea that what we think of as this separate category of people, bright people, right, are doing a bunch of stuff that sort of magnify, whatever gifts they may have, or at least they could be doing those things, and that these things are learnable, right? And so the notion is that if we pay attention to these lessons, then we can leverage our gifts better, right? We can get more out of, the different intelligences that we have and all that kind of good stuff. And one of the things she said is, I agree with what you're saying, and these are really good points, but there comes a point at which, bright is bright. Like there are sort of, and that one didn't bother me in that context because contextually, what she was pointing out is that it benefits everybody if we can deconflate how powerful your engine is versus how good a driver you are. And they're both important, right? And this book is about becoming a better driver, but it's not about, like your engine is your engine. And yet, I don't believe that your engine is your engine. I do believe that there are things you can do that will actually improve the engine over time. It's laborious, but it works. But again, her point wasn't that it can't be done. Her point was just that's not the point of your book. The point of your book is let's think about these skills. And to that degree, I certainly agree. But that whole...
Can I jump in on that real quick?
Yeah.
I'm curious about, one quick observation, and then I want to ask my question of you. Observation is, I love that you use the word more, basically like, how, brighter, making a comparison, basically saying like, let's go from where we are and let's get a little bit better at what we do.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, am I going to become a genius? Oh my God, that can be just an incredibly anxiety-producing and torturous question to ask. But, am I going to end the day with slightly more skill than I had at the beginning? Okay, that's a bar I can get behind trying to clear.
I find that word so problematic, genius.
Yeah, no, for sure. I used it on purpose, right? Just to point out how freighted it is.
It's even the people that we think of as geniuses or refer to as geniuses. I don't think we're doing them a disservice. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by thinking of them that way. It's
for sure.
These are just people.
Yeah, totally.
So here's my question to you. So yesterday we were talking, and you were saying how the way we think is, or the way our minds work is as a series of hacks, right?
We're getting into this. Yeah, sure.
Shortcut. So the thing I'm wondering is, like, some minds are probably capable of taking on hacks more quickly, finding the most efficient hacks and choosing them and adopting them, right? But if you're learning hacks, and if that's kind of the primary job of getting smarter, then like how much does horsepower really matter?
Okay.
If you're willing to put the time in, can you learn as many hacks as you would need, or learn enough hacks to become, what some people might regard as a genius, even if you're not.
Okay. So this also gets into the dichotomy between like in business development or in entrepreneurial circles, right? It's great that you have a great idea, but execution really matters. Well, obviously what matters is sort of a good idea and great execution, but obviously you need to have both, and execution is the thing that people are usually missing. And in the same way, like if you want to be like a proper, incredible, unusual, very successful, whatever, genius, call it what you will, right? But if you want to move far to the right on whatever you want to call that axis, you need to have both, right? You need to have some potential and you need to realize it. But the fact is that like realizing the potential you have, that's the low-hanging fruit. So that's where our focus goes, right? It's not really about how much can you change the workings of your brain. It's more about let's do the part that we can do most easily. And now I totally want to get into it for a few different reasons. First of all, to get back to get into your conversation with that parent. So I think there is a degree to which aptitude is aptitude in the sense that not in the sense of this child cannot possibly become super skilled at a thing that she currently has no skill in. That's absolutely possible, right? But she's not doing it by the time the ACT score needs to get turned in. Right? That like if she decides that she wants to become the world champion underwater basket weaver and she's never swum before, like you can do that in a lifetime. But if you've decided you want to get a 36 on the ACT, you're not going to do that in 9 months. I don't care if you're working with Ted, right? Like it's just like that's just too far to go, right? In the given time. And I've often said to people like I can get you a perfect score on the SAT or the ACT, it's just that you're going to have to take a year off from school to do it. And we're going to do a bunch of stuff that you're going to prefer to have done other things in that year. Like it's not that it can't be done. It's that there's a price you pay for it. Sort of, there's a price you pay with your soul, right? Because because some of the things that you have to learn in order to do that, are of sort of limited value outside that context. And yet, I'm going to contradict myself to some degree with what I'm going to say next, which is that okay, granted, there are some kinds of improvement that you can't do in the time frame that you're dealing with here. But the thing that really saddens me about that parent comment that you're relaying is that there's a ton of stuff you can change in that time frame. And the beautiful part is some of it is useful only in the context of the ACT, but not nearly as much as people think. Right? Like, yes, it is true that the ACT is testing your total, how much of, you said, I forget how you said it, but it's testing sort of how well you've encyclopedized in your mind the math that you're supposed to have learned in
the math vocabulary. Yeah.
Math vocabulary. Thank you. Okay. So yes, that's true. Right. And so to some degree, it's like, okay, we got to fill in the pages that are a little bit fuzzy. Right. And it's like, well, that's only useful for the ACT. Well, no, the reason it's part of a math curriculum is that it's going to come in handy for other things later, too. So there's intrinsic value there. But the meta value kind of swamps all of it, like the value of, okay, we're going to do an A to Z review of what you know in this relatively broad field. We're going to find the spots where you're missing some stuff, and then we're going to look at ways that you can take on board not just new knowledge, but new schema for thinking, not only quickly, but in a way that won't fall apart under the pressure of a test. Like, there's a lot there.
There is so much there. There are so many separate valuable lessons within that, right? It's basically like, we can take a target area and we can improve it, and that can be done. And I can show you that can be done, and you can use that. You can take that knowledge into the rest of your life. That's right. Going to know that there is a certain amount of anxiety that you feel when you take a test, and we are going to work through that, feel it, and process it and achieve a result despite that. What are you talking about? Right. These are insanely valuable lessons.
Exactly. And it's not like it's ACT specific. And here's where we bring it around to the topic that, we're ostensibly supposed to be talking about here, which is that if you're really approaching learning from I was about to say from the right perspective. Let me just say that there are perspectives from which you can approach learning any topic that will give you all kinds of sort of follow-on bonuses that can swamp the value of the thing you're setting out to learn.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to go I want to go so deep and meta on that. You know what I mean? It's I don't think I'm quite ready for it. I was just thinking about. I don't know. There's a personal and human quality to what we're talking about that I think comes through, and that I think is sometimes mentally kept separate, often separate from people's perspective about education. That they don't see it as a personal activity, as an important like interactive, like quality,
Sure.
where they think it's facts and figures. They think it's
Sure.
details, and it is, but it isn't. And and that
Yeah.
the how you learn is as important or more important than the what you learn.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I sometimes use the analogy with folks who have trouble kind of connecting those dots, that like getting good at reading is not about like, oh yeah, I have trouble every time I see the letter V. Oh, let's drill the letter V until it's like, that's not like, yes, reading does involve the letters, but like fundamentally, it's not like one of the 26 letters is causing you trouble if you're having reading. That's not what it's about, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is this. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I had I had an interesting moment last night. So I was teaching this class, and it was the first time I taught them, and they were terrific. It was like a really, really great group of kids. And they, it's a funny thing, actually. This is, classic me going on a tangent, and then from there another tangent. I don't like calling my students kids, actually, because I think kids is like it separates the generations and like it draws a distinction between us that I'm not actually not I'm not comfortable with on their behalf, but I'm not even comfortable with in general. It's like, this is not, yes, they don't have as much experience as I do, and that's the only thing I might be pointing at, and that's the reason I'm doing most of the teaching, not all the teaching, most of the teaching. But I don't like the generational divide that creates. Anyway, the interesting moment during this class was that I kept modeling for them what it looks like to get something wrong and or to learn from your own error, and I was doing it live. You know what I mean? It was happening in the moment, and I wasn't really intentional until it started happening. Then I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I'll show them how a person can think, and how a person can even be conscious. And, being conscious of your own thinking that's something that you and I specialize in, and other people's thinking as well. But, I don't think it's always like the most important thing, but by showing it, by kind of like talking it through, I think hopefully they could see, oh, not only is it okay to get something wrong, it's useful, and from getting something wrong, we can walk through to understanding it better, understanding our own understanding, you know what I mean? Like, become better learners, basically. So I don't know, just an interesting moment from that class.
No, that makes
Showing
perfect
my
sense.
flaws. Yeah.
The thing for me is how that relates back to parenting, right? And if there's one thing I do not want to do, it's give parenting advice, because oh boy, parenting is hard. But what I will say is that there is a lot of crossover between what we do and parenting, at least on the theoretical level, in the sense that, like, oh gosh, where do I begin? I'm thinking about some of the sort of the parenting choices that my co-parent and I have been having with respect to our kids, where you're constantly making this choice of like, okay, on one hand, I want to stop this behavior that's happening in this moment because it's causing some difficulties. But at the same time, it's like, well, okay, I have to sort of balance stopping this behavior in this moment and sort of training this kind of behavior out in future. But as soon as I use the word training, it's like, well, I'm not talking about a dog here. Like, what I really want is for this kid to see this from my perspective and make choices I would prefer. Or is that really what I want? Because that's sort of speaking to compliance. Like, yes, to some degree, right? If she's hitting her brother, then okay, we've got to stop that. But like, you really get into this thing of like, there's a level of intentionality there where it's like, okay, I have a minute or two in which to make some decisions around this situation, whatever it may be. And sometimes it's just like, okay, we got to shut this down and move on. But sometimes it's like, okay, there's a teaching moment here, maybe. And, I can kind of catalyze towards a teaching moment. And then the frustrating part, of course, is, right, you set something up so that the kid gets, oh, wait a minute, I never thought of it that way, right? And then, of course, you've got to deal with, for the next 6 months, it's not going to change behavior. It's one of those things that kind of gets filed away and only comes out later. But there's so many, I'm sorry, talk about a super tangent, a super meta, but like there's...
No, it's great.
There's so much about that where it's like, yeah, this is, any relationship that has the property that one or both parties is meant to get something out of it, has some of these properties. And so it occurs to me, like, that's a real connection between tutoring and parenting, right? Is there's this very, like, in the case, someone is paying you to give the student something, right? And in the same way, like, being a parent, oh my gosh, talk about a costly undertaking, not just in money, but just in attention. And like, there's just so much that goes into it. I mean, I feel dumb saying that out loud because it's so obvious.
How much do you, as someone who is both a parent and an observer of parents, are you able to keep sort of like a split dual mindset, and does that sort of external knowledge inform your parenting? Because I think that, I know
yes to all.
Yeah. And I know as a tutor, I think I see it. I see the relationship and the effect of the relationship a little bit different than the parent does, because I think the viewpoint can be a little bit myopic at times. You want what you want for your kid. You may adjust that if you're thoughtful over time. But you're just kind of stuck with that one mindset. So do you benefit from and can you elaborate
Sure.
on how you've benefited from being outside that relationship too?
Yes to all. So the first thing to point out is, I've been a tutor for over 20 years. I've been a parent for 7, and for some of those 7 years, I did not have, sort of a verbal sort of, fully conscious in the way we think of, right. So my point is that, right, my tutoring experience
the kids were not fully verbal. You're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And none of my kids are yet as old as the kind of student that I most typically work with. Right.
They're not taking the AMC.
Yeah, exactly. Might be on the path, but like we're not there yet for sure. So, so the thing I'm saying here is that it's I'm in that kind of Dunning-Kruger zone with respect to this. In that, I have some game when it comes to tutoring. I have some experience. To some degree, right? I know what I'm doing. When it comes to parenting, oh my gosh, no, that's just crazy. Like, I could see like. A parent of 4 or 5 kids where all the kids are adults, it's like, okay, that person has some serious game. But for the rest of us, it's like, we're never going to get there. And in any case, my kids are too young to be any part. So I guess what I'm saying, first of all, is that parenting is the kind of thing that, unlike most things, you don't get to, generally speaking, you don't do it 20 times. Most
Right.
of the things that we get good at in our careers, like we have a lot of opportunity to do it again and again and again and again and again. But
Right.
you learn how to parent a 7-year-old, and then you have another 7-year-old, and it's a different 7-year-old. And like by the time you feel like you know what's going on, nobody's 7 anymore, right?
Right. Exactly.
So that's part of the issue. But which is why parenting books and groups and stuff can be so very, very valuable. But anyway, but the other piece of it is that even setting that stuff aside, right? I'm still new enough to this game, right? That I don't understand all the pieces of that. So some of the things that come up for me are that it's really easy for me to assume certain kinds of sort of parenting understanding that in fact I lack, right? So it is very helpful for me to remember, okay, like I'm not this kid's parent, right? I am not insofar as I can empathize with the parents, that's helpful. But like, it's very helpful to remember that, like, yeah, no, I don't really know what their frame is. I try to understand what their frame is and so on. But yeah, it's not like being a parent gives me any kind of magical powers in that respect. But one thing it really does do is it gives me even more depth of empathy for what the parents are doing. Because the fact is that parenting is so like some of the other difficult things that we do in life that are just sort of multidimensional and complicated, right? Like, yes, you may have some values that you're trying to parent according to or pass along to your kids or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, like there's the logistics of getting them to where they need to go. There's the long-term vision of what relationship you want to have with them, what you want to pass along to them. And then there's the business of like, they're in the middle of a class. Well, you've been in classes before. You have some experience. You can help them understand that if they do their homework on time, then they will have a better experience, that sort of thing. And yet, again, you have the problem that anecdote gets confused with data, right? Like what worked for you as a student may or may not work for your daughter as a student because she may or may not have some of the same temperamental bits that made that thing work well for you. So, I mean, it's just like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I have some more perspectives on it, but mostly it just feels like a messier soup where you just gotta, take a deep breath and empathize with the student, with the parent, with the teachers who are doing their best, and, dive in there, suit up and, do the best you can to make a difference.
Of course. I mean, that's all we can ever do, right? Is the best we can. I mean, I come at this from two perspectives. Okay. One is my own as a pupil, as a student.
Sure.
And then one is observing my kids as well, and my students. I said kids again. I say kids in an affectionate way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Understood.
They're my.
There's a coworker of mine who always referred to our students as kiddos, which I thought was nice because it's such an unusual word that it was like, okay, we're clearly using this in a context, to speak warmly and to categorize them without putting too much freight on it. Anyway.
And right, and to continue down that tangent, the only danger of that is if the student hears you call them a kiddo, they may feel belittled. That's
for sure.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Unless they're a Quentin Tarantino fan, in which case they may be complimented.
What
Kill Bill? Beatrice Kiddo is the protagonist, isn't that right?
That's right.
I think that's Uma Thurman's character.
I saw Volume Beatrice 1. Kiddo. I don't think I saw Volume 2.
I don't even. Yeah, so long ago.
It was fine. It was fine. It's so not my genre.
Okay.
I appreciate professionalism, and that's what I can say. It was good.
Okay.
It was fine.
There you go.
Anyway, the way that people learn, the way the students learn, is by themselves. You can be imparted with something, but even if you memorize something, even if you memorize a thought process, you have to make it your own. And when you don't, there is some danger. There's like some kind of like a potential feeling of isolation, basically, where it's like, I do this because I was told to do this. And you can find so many examples in so many contexts of people who, in a way, weirdly, that's brainwashing. When you know what I mean? When you think the way that someone else told you to think, and you don't question it, and you don't customize it, and you don't add it into your own sort of, system of thinking in a way that works just for you. So because it has to happen on an individual level, because it has to happen for the individual, you can't, as a teacher, force it. They have to pick it up. They have to get it. And you can keep inviting them in, and they have to walk through the door. This is the opposite of Dracula, who wants to come in. You know what I mean? Like you want this vampire to come into your house, and you're begging him, but he has to make the decision.
Yeah, no, and this connects back to parenting too, right? Because it's a very, very easy to fall into frame as a parent that you can make your kids do stuff,
Right.
And you can make them repeat after you, maybe, but at the end of the day, you can't make them think. Yeah, exactly. Like there really is a limit to what you can do, right?
Right.
I think one of the challenges that I've experienced personally as a parent is, coming to recognize that in a very real sense, I have no power over the thing I care most about for them, which is what they think, nor should I. Like, it is not my place to decide what another human thinks, right? But I'm going to keep opening the door. And, in certain ways, there are certain, kinds of thought that I would like for them to have facility with. But at the end of the day, I may be related to them, but they're not me. And so, they're,
they have to decide.
Yeah. Well, which is super easy to say when you're not standing at the playground with a screaming kid who refuses to get in the car and, yada. Obviously it's easy to be highfalutin about this stuff when we're in the middle of a podcast and not in the middle of one of those, but, still. Right?
They have to have a reason to realize that slugging another kid on the playground is not a good idea, and they can learn that from discipline. They can learn that from discipline, but that won't stick. That won't be lasting. You know what I mean?
Well,
they have to have a reason besides my parent wants me to do it this way.
Well, and again, right? There are certain ages where my parent wants me to do it is very effective for that age, and it might be a lasting lesson. But there's just an enormous amount of nuance in, if you get the sort of developmental appropriateness of your intervention wrong, then it's not only ineffective, but you look like a total moron in front of all the other parents and all. It's like, I can't tell you, like sometimes my kids surprise me in the sense of like, oh gosh, I'm kind of hitting them over the head with this idea when really I don't need to be nearly so dogmatic about it. They get it. And then the flip side is true too, right? Like I'm trying to reason with a toddler and it's like, I'm not going to reason with this toddler. Let's just pick him up off and just move him into the car and we'll go get some ice cream or like whatever.
Yeah, of course. That's funny. That's a good example. I just thought I thought of a family. I was going to tell my favorite, and by favorite I mean least favorite, sort of like example of like a family type, and I think probably my guess is everybody knows one or two of these family types.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
What you got?
Well, I've got something on the queue, but I don't mean to.
Great.
Go ahead.
Great. No.
Yeah, it's
cue it up.
Yep.
So I'm gonna speak about this family type in general, and then I'm gonna give one example and basically how it fails.
Oh.
Just one demonstration of how it can fail.
Yeah, sure.
So the family type is the one where everybody has names that start with the same letter, including the dog. Okay, so it's like it's Benji and Brian and the mom is Beverly and Brianna, and it just goes down the list, right?
Uh-huh. And Buckles the German Shepherd. Go on.
Yeah, that's an amazing dog name. Yeah. They are all expected to go to the same college, and that college is usually the one that typically the father went to. Maybe the father and the mother, but this is an old school model I'm describing, and I don't know. Maybe there's an update. Maybe
Bodwin or Bryn Mawr or Barnard.
Yeah.
Sticking with the B thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. The specific example I have to share is a student of mine. He was I did not work with his older brothers. Another weird thing about this is they all tend to be of the same gender. The children, for some reason, all just like, I don't know how like the genetics, how that works, but it just seems like, and there are 4 boys in the family. Anyway, he was the last, he was the youngest, and I think he was the 3rd. He could have been the 4th, but I think he was the 3rd.
Okay.
And he was the first of the family that I worked with.
Okay.
And father went to Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
Oldest brother went to Georgetown. Middle brother went to Georgetown.
Okay.
Guess where this one's going, right? Guess where this one has to go.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
So the problem was that he was a different person than his siblings and than his dad. And he wasn't all that like preternaturally gifted. He was smart. He was totally acceptably smart. But I don't think, had he not been in this family, I don't think that he would have gravitated towards Georgetown. I don't think that would have been, his college counselor would not have started with that on his list.
Right.
So the parents in that situation, they really won't take no for an answer.
Mm.
And the demands get to be so rigorous and then ultimately so out of line with the reality of the situation that there is suffering, the kid ends up suffering, and I saw it, I witnessed it, and in fact, not only does the kid suffer, the test prep professional can also suffer because the demands are just, they're beyond reality.
No, that's totally true. But let's focus on the real one, which is that the relationship between the kid and the parents over the long term is going to suffer. I mean, that's the one that breaks my heart. It's like you're gonna leave my practice and you're gonna go off and you're gonna do things, and I'm sad for a while, but like, this relationship is going to be your parent-child relationship for the rest of your lives.
And you know what? What's even worse than that? Honestly, what's amazingly somehow even worse than that is the relationship within the kid is going to suffer. Basically, that kid's not developing a holistic identity.
Well, yeah,
that kid's developing an identity that's half family, half themselves.
Yeah,
and there's a schism.
Oh, believe me, having gone to an extremely selective undergraduate institution, I'm sure you can't relate to this at all. There were plenty of people there, and I may have been one of them. I will, whatever. But for whom integrating those two identities was a real, that was an uphill struggle, right? There's the the person you are, insofar as you are intrinsically, a particular person, and then there's the sort of the vision of you that has been sort of built, and on which you recognize you rely in part for your admission to this exclusive institution, right? If everyone hadn't been kind of pushing you along and sort of, holding you to these high standards and all this stuff, it's like, well, geez, what I've gotten here, and then imposter syndrome comes in, and there's all kinds of stuff that's in there.
Yeah.
To pop the bookmark, because this might be a time to get into it, right?
Yeah.
Might be a nice segue. The second order effects is sort of the phrase that I would use to describe a lot of what we're talking about here, right? You're doing a thing in order to get a result, but because you are influencing a dynamic system, another person, right? They will adjust to the thing that's being imposed externally in ways that may be hard to predict. And the story for me that really encapsulates this was I think she was a high school sophomore. I had this student, probably a decade ago. And I'm sad to say I don't even remember her name. I'm usually pretty good about that stuff. But she came to me, and she was having trouble in her math class. And it became clear that part of what was going on was that the way her parents were trying to be directly supportive of her were causing some trouble. And as I did some more digging, I recognized that, like, since the girl was a very young age, the dad had like played games with her and done stuff with her that was clearly intended to help her have this certain basis of knowledge, right? So, for example, she knew the powers of 2 up to 2 to the 12th because that was just a thing that the dad had always done, and which is, I say that with some sort of personal embarrassment, because I've done the same thing to my daughter on some levels, right? Like, there are certain things that she knows that are sort of not in the first grade curriculum because I've just, I don't know, that's just a thing that you do, is, it's important to know these, who knows that they're, anyway, that doesn't matter. But the point was that while the student had learned these powers of 2, what she hadn't done is learned why the dad cared. Like, they were clearly, like, of intrinsic interest to the dad. There was some interesting puzzle going on with the powers of 2, and, like, it was valuable to him and enjoyable to him and all this kind of stuff. But none of that stuff was enjoyable to her. So it was just this random knowledge collecting dust on a shelf over here, where it's not enriching her life in any way, and it's not even enriching the relationship between the student and the parent, right? And it was just like, oh God, you won the battle and lost the war on that one, And there's so much of that I think we see in, as sort of intimate but external observers of some of these relationships, at least with respect to education, where the second order effects matter, right? The first order effect that the dad is going for is, I would like my daughter to know this stuff. And again, I'm just admitting, right? I've fallen into that same mindset with my own kids. And yet you got to recognize that, like, you're not programming a computer here, right? You're talking to another human, and they will have their own interpretation of why you're saying the thing you're saying and why it might be important and how it's going to resonate forward and all this kind of stuff. And that's why that sort of top-down, fill the pitcher of their mind with the water of knowledge is just a dumpster fire, because they're not a pitcher and it isn't water, right? Like, you're gonna kindle the fire or you're not, but, like, once it's started, it's out of your hands, Jack.
I'm thinking about those powers of 2, and I'm thinking that the content is interesting. The content's actually kind of, actually, you know what? It's kind of interesting. It can be interesting, but I think the purpose of it, and you were getting at this, and I like the verb you used, this idea of, like, kindling the fire. Kindling the fire is basically acknowledging that you are not the fire. The kid is the fire, and they are doing their thing separately from you.
Totally.
So the point I would make is that you could teach the same exact content, and it can be doing different work for different people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I could go back in time and teach myself some things that I wish I knew at the time, I feel like I would have some modicum of success with that, because I know my own mind. And even if I don't know my own mind, like, I am me, and you talking to you is just easier than someone else talking to you. But even so, there'd be limitations. I don't have a perfect recollection of what I was like at 17. I'd probably meet myself and be like, gosh, this guy's kind of more different than I realized. But, like, when you're not even talking to yourself, you're talking to a different human entirely. Oh my gosh, it's the height of hubris that, I can catalyze it. It's like, okay, we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of different tools. We have a lot of different ways we can reliably catalyze certain certain changes in people's minds for sure.
Right.
But it's not like, oh, here is the path and we can get everyone to follow the path. It's like there are 20 different paths, and I know something about all 20 paths, and they all go to the same destination. I can reliably get you to the destination, but like, I don't know what path you're going to take because that's on you. Like, you're going to need to, you're going to need to change, right? You're going to need to take on these new ideas. You're going to need to test these things that we're suggesting are going to be helpful to you. You're going to need to decide that this test is worth this effort. Like, there's just you can't.
I really like this verb right now, which is like that we are inviting people to change. You know what I mean? That it's basically like... It
sounds so Northern California when you say it that way, though.
Is that okay? Yeah, I mean, that's... I'm learning about Northern California, so help me out. But, the idea of just like... I like the 20 paths. I like, I'm also kind of thinking even fewer than that. You know what I mean? Like 4 or 5 paths.
Sure. Okay, whatever.
Yeah. And just saying like, down this path is this, it'll feel this way. It'll require this type of work. That is that path. Path B will, will look and feel like this. And then just inviting each person to sort of make their own decision, and then show them, give them sort of like the guideposts of like, along the way.
Yep.
This is what you're going to experience. And let me even kind of like recognize that when you get there and tell you, it's like, hey, you're at point A.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Well, one of the things that I like about the word inviting in this context is that it makes clear that the student has locus of control. The student has agency. The student has to make the decision of whether they want to learn this thing or not. The thing I don't like about it is that, to me, it sort of it implies that I'm going to stand at the doorway and gesture at it, but you're going to have to do all the work. And you're going to have to figure out the path and stuff. And like, even as I say that, it's like, well, actually, that's kind of true. I am just kind of gesturing, and you do have to figure out your own path. But the difference is that I feel like I'm not merely inviting, but I am a knowledgeable tour guide, right? You have to decide that you're going to come on the tour, but like, it's not like I'm going to put you in a kayak and send you down Class 5 rapids and not be there with an oar with you. Like, you have my expertise to rely on. We're going to be safe in this context, right? You're going to have a real adventure. Yes, you're going to be on the river, but like, you're not going to be in life-threatening danger the way you would be if you tried to chart these waters alone. And I've never found a way to sort of simultaneously say that, like, you're going to be fine, right? Like, I know this territory and I'm going to guide you. And yet, maybe that's the way to put it, right? Like, we will be your experienced guide, whatever, but there is not a single step on this path we're taking for you. Like, you still have to walk the walk. It's just that I'm standing right next to you and I can help you find your footing at any point that you may get lost.
This is an interesting one. I think I think I have shared this before on the podcast. I'm not sure, but I had this joke with several students over the years about that they wanted me to be with them in the test, but they didn't really need me to be there sharing stuff out loud with them. They just needed to know that I was like a potential guide to them. I don't even know. And it'd be interesting to like try to figure out exactly what it was.
You kind of like there was a little you on their shoulder, kind of whispering in their ear, in the sense that like, oh, what would Ted tell me to do in this situation? Oh, what Ted would say to do. Oh, maybe I'll do that kind of thing.
The joke we had was that they would have a little framed picture of me, framed, right? And I would literally be like this. You can't hear this, obviously. About to explain something, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, like, that kind
finger
of that look
up
on your face, right? Yeah.
And another thing, and something I'd like to share with you is this: is the look on my face.
Right.
And that was that joke. It wasn't even really a joke. It played for years, and everyone who I shared it with understood, and I hope kind of actually took me into the test with them in that way. But what an interesting thing that they needed the person, and they needed the influence that told them you can think differently. You can do this differently. You know what I mean? And they needed just that last little reminder, because we were working in sort of in a short-term capacity, where I didn't have them. They weren't my children. I wasn't able to sort of, or even my students in the classroom where I'd have them for 9 months. I had them for 3 months, usually, 4 or 5 maybe. So they wanted just that extra little reminder that they had learned from somebody.
Okay, so I think you're aware that memory competitors, right? People who are trying to out-memorize other competitors in some constrained competition, right? Who can memorize the most digits of pi in one day, you know, that kind of stuff. People who do this sort of thing. One of the sort of tried and true tricks is that they will visualize themselves walking through some environment they're familiar with, or maybe an environment they're making up. I'm not sure about those details. But what they will do is they will place things they want to memorize in the environment in particular locations in ways that are meaningful to them, so that later they can retrace their steps and see the things that have been left behind. Oh, I left 9 kernels of corn on the, one of the digits is 9, right? That, you know, crazy stuff like that. Not because in a perfect world this would make any sense at all, but because inside the imperfect minds that we all have, there's sort of an outsized, like an unnecessarily large proportion of our mental resources happen to be devoted to remembering where things are in space. Like, it's just how our brains work. And so having recognized that that's how our brains work, and like, you can fight City Hall or you can just accept your brain works this way, right? Let's work with it. Okay, how can we do this? Well, we'll walk through this imaginary space and we'll leave reminders through it, and it will just work for us. You know, and that's part of what I was talking about before when I talked about sort of the hacks in our brains, right? It's like, you know, like in some idealistic way, I might prefer to have a mind where I could just say, hey, I would like my mind to be optimized for remembering digits and not having to go through this intermediate step of placing digits in a fake environment, right? More like a computer. But the fact is, like, that's never going to happen. Like, this is the brain I have. How helpful to me to just accept, okay, this is how this brain works. And I can leverage that fact. I can learn those skills, right? And I can choose to use the strengths that the brain has to get me to a place that I want to go. Like, it's a hack, but it works. So to heck with it. So if having your framed picture on the wall catalyzes that good outcome, I say, you know, more power to you, Jack. Get it done.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. By the way, you can use your awareness of your human tendencies to create new positive outcomes and to avoid other sort of like maladaptive behaviors and thought patterns. You know, basically say like, why am I thinking this way? Oh, it's because I'm concerned about my survival, because that's the most important thing that humans have. You know, and that's me jumping from like the stimulus way down the road to like the actual human response and fear. But like that is the reason that you feel that way. And as soon as you can kind of trace that path, then you can say, okay, does this feel relevant? Does this, you know, is this in the psychological reality? Is this in the reality of the physical world? And if it's not, then you can start to, you know, change that belief system.
I think you hit the nail on the head with your choice of the words maladaptive. Because speaking for myself, having been trained as a computer engineer back in the past, right? One of the mental models that continues with me to this day is just that recollection of like, okay, I can program a computer and then it will behave reliably according to the instructions I've given it, right? I mean, yes, there might be some bugs and there might be some other weird behavior, but generally speaking, if you write a program to say hello world, and when you run the program, the computer will say hello world, okay? And that's so not the model when it comes to learning new behaviors or teaching new behaviors, right? Like, the reason I'm jumping on the word maladaptive is that in the case of a computer program, you write some stuff down and it follows the instructions. In the case of any human relationship, you offer some inputs and they respond to the inputs. They might respond in a way that you consider to be completely nuts or at least completely alien, but like, it's just about how they respond. No one is gonna, like, it's so rare that you'll say to someone, hey, this is what you should do, and they'll be like, yeah, that's what I should do. I'm going to follow your instructions exactly. That's just not how it goes, right?
Not only is that not how it goes in that moment, the thing that you teach them is going to change over time. It's going to adapt. You know what I mean? Right. Like we computers will always say, like, if you plug that same computer in and you have the same power going to it, it'll say hello world today and 20 years from now. Right.
Whereas all you're doing in the case of both parenting and tutoring, I would argue, right, is you're offering a bunch of inputs. You're observing how the system responds. And again, you're a dynamic system too, right? You might, that's part of why parenting books exist. Like, I tried this thing that my parents did with me. It was super successful with me. It's not working with my kid. Why not? It's because the dynamic system is different, right? Like, you were the student and they were the parent. Now you're the parent. And
And your kid is not you. Yeah.
And your kid is not you, and your kid is not your parent. And there's all these different variables where it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I have a heady question, and I think we should use as the wrap, because I definitely don't know the answer to this, and I don't know.
I'm sure I don't.
Not. Maybe you
let's
do.
have it. All right, let's go.
I wonder if computer programming is becoming, if programs themselves, and this probably is like an AI thing, that the programs themselves will be adaptive. In a way.
Hold on. If you're going to ask that question, I'm going to get in there. And this is going to be great, because the kinds of folks who listen to this podcast are going to know so much more about this that they're going to later. And then we're going to do the real deal. But I don't know. It's going to be part of the fun. But like so one of the big things that's happened in the last 5 or 10 years, right? Machine learning, AI, all that kind of good stuff, is about the notion that by I'm going to humanize what the computer is doing here in a way that is bending the truth a little bit, but it gives you kind of the sense of it. The form of computer programming that I'm used to is the one where you say, it's imperative, right? Okay, computer, I want you to do these things. First, you will do this, and then you will do this. Machine learning is more about, okay, computer, here is a bunch of data, okay, and I'm going to tell you that that this particular collection of data has this property, and this collection of data does not have this property. And then we're going to set up a system wherein, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but fundamentally, a big part of what happens in this machine learning context is that the machine system is trying different methods for correctly sorting the data into one category or the other. And because there's sort of an externally imposed, judge that tells you whether that's a picture of a cat or not, right? Mm-hmm. You're able to just do it your own way, right? No one is telling the machine learning system how to tell a cat from a non-cat. It's only telling the system this is a cat, this is not a cat in some cases, and it's trying to work out for itself. Mm-hmm. And one of the properties that's so interesting about machine learning is when a machine learning system is done, doing its thing, and it can tell a cat from a non-cat or whatever it is you're trying to do, it is not possible to unpack the system, like to go read the source code and figure out how the machine is doing it. Like that's just not how it works. There's just a bunch of stuff that's going in there, and there are these little weightings, these little numbers that govern the connections of different nodes within the system. And you can read out the numbers, but they have no meaning. They have as much meaning to you as it would be if you opened up my brain and observed how the neurons were connected to each other and tried to infer something about, my love of ham sandwiches or whatever. It's just like you're not going to ever that's never going to happen, right?
Unless you programmed another computer to observe that computer and those values and make sense of those values.
Not in my lifetime, but yeah, sure. Okay. In theory, sure. But the point that I'm making here, or I don't know if I'm really making the point I would like to be making is that in imperative computer programming, you can read the source code and you can see what's supposed to be happening and you can talk about that stuff. In machine learning, it's just a big black box. Like some stuff is happening and you're getting some good outputs. And I got to tell you, that second is what tutoring feels like to me, and it's what parenting feels like to me. Yes, like you can talk to the student, you can talk to your kid, and they will tell you what they tell you, and they might be telling you the truth, and they might not. And and you're just doing the best you can to figure out what's going on in there and to help every way you can. But at the end of the day, most of it is mystery. You remember that from when you were a student, and you know it from when you're a teacher, and the same thing, at least is my experience of being a parent and was of being the child of other parents. It's just,
one of my favorite things to do with our podcast is to basically land on a conclusion. Like this is just, me
a non-conclusion. Is that no, go ahead.
Yes. No, exactly right. Which is basically, this sort of like, reductive and unsatisfying conclusion, which today is children are black boxes, students are black boxes, and we will never understand them.
Yay! What an uplifting note to end on.
Say the two expert educators. That's so funny. That's a good one. That's a top-notch anti-conclusion.
I want to tag down on that, but you're right. That's a good stopping point.
He's Wes Carroll. He is on the web at wescarroll.com, and you spell that with 2 R's and 2 L's. And, you just listen to this podcast, and so you know how smart he is. You know how, thoughtful he is. You know that how actively he's thinking about education. I don't need to sell him. He just sold himself. This is it. Like, the proof's in the pudding. So that's Wes Carroll.
Stealer of the thunder, Ted Dorsey, Ted at tutorted.com, on the web at tutorted.com. All the things you just said about me are at least as true of you. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you, because I always leave either feeling smarter or feeling like I have something to aspire to. And either way, I appreciate it. It is very, very good stuff. And I do hope that all the listeners who have needs in your specialty of SAT and ACT prep will get in touch with you in order that they can experience firsthand what it's like to have someone with that depth of knowledge help you think better.
Thank you, kind sir. I'll see you next time.
That sounds good. Thanks as always. Thanks for hanging with us. Click subscribe, ring the bell, tell a friend, leave a comment. You know